Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our 5th webinar of the webinar series, Education for All Learners, Sustainable Approaches for COVID-19 Response in Jordan. Today, we have the 5th webinar, and we're talking about are parents the new teachers, defining roles and responsibilities. And that's actually webinar I'm looking myself really forward to as a parent, as somebody going through a difficult time in the last months by myself. But I'm also looking forward because it was a topic we kind of cross-discussed also in the last webinars. It came up like the responsibilities and roles of caretakers, parents. That was something which we also had a lot of questions, a lot of diverse discussion in the last webinars. So before starting now in our really exciting topic, I like to give you the webinar house rules and logistics. And before doing that, my name is Stephanie Petrasch, and I'm the head of the education cluster in Jordan, GIZ Jordan, and I'm also the project manager of the Promise project, promoting quality and inclusive education in Jordan. The language of the webinar is English. Also, our presentations today will be in English, but we have a simultaneous translation in Arabic. You can find the link to the YouTube channel where you can listen to the translation in the chat, probably now. And also we will document the webinar, and then later you can find it in both languages in our different social media channels. We decided, because also it's usually a larger crowd of participants, that audio and video function for the participants are switched off, but at any time off and during the presentations, you can use the chat for your comments, your questions, your remarks. So please use it, because we like to have an active audience, and we will always provide either we will monitor like my colleagues David De Battista and Savine Al-Tali will monitor the chat, and then we will just see depending on your question comments, we will see when to facilitate to have them being presented. The webinar will be recorded to make it available for our participants or the non-participants later. So as there is all functions, audio and video function are switched off, but of course the chat can be seen, but still we have to inform you that it will be recorded. If you're not happy with that one, please, you have to leave the webinar now and have to have a look later on the recordings. So we have about 1.5 hours now for our webinar. We usually start with the presentations and then have a bit more in-depth time for the discussion, but also we find out during the last webinars that we deal with this one also quite flexible. But altogether we have 1.5 hours ahead of us. And today I'd like to welcome our guest. And first of all, I'd like to welcome again, which is more than a guest, it's also a colleague from the Ministry of Education in Jordan, Dr. Musa Gunaymat. And he's also became the face of the webinar series from the Ministry of Education. Thanks to have you again today in our webinars. I'd like to welcome also Esther Salamon from Parents International, currently based in the Netherlands. Welcome. And also Ya-Ling from the National Taichung University of Education in Taiwan, working for the voluntary services overseas. Great to see you both again. We had a pre-chat some weeks ago where already could see, yes, there will be really exciting things coming up. So the frame of our webinar series, some of you probably might already have watched or participated in one of our last webinars, but the idea, of course, came when COVID-19 happened. But on the other hand, we just had launched the 10 years inclusive education strategy of Jordan. And then we wanted to do something even during a time people couldn't meet. So that was the initial idea. And then we also wanted to take the chance to get to represent different topics which are relevant in the strategy, but also very relevant now during the current time. And taking the chance to link different persons from different places, different organizations. And I mean, that already we can see had happened in the last webinars, and we're really looking forward also for the next 2 webinars to continue this interlinkage and interchange. So I like to hand over to our first speaker. And this is Dr. Musa Gnunaymat. As I had told you, he's the head of Students with Disabilities Programs in the Directorate at the Ministry of Education. And he has 24 years of experience in the education, in the Ministry of Education and Jordan, and he holds a PhD in special education learning difficulties. And Dr. Musa will now frame our today's session under the 10-year strategy for inclusive education. And he will do this in Arabic. So anybody who wants to listen it in English has to switch now to the YouTube channel. Okay, thanks. I'm handing over now.
شكرا ستيفاني، الحمد لله على السلامة لوصولك سالمة إلى ألمانيا. إن شاء الله نراك قريبا بدون أي حواجز إن شاء الله. بداية أود أن أجدد ترحيبي بكافة الحضور والمشاركين، وأتمنى لكافة طلابنا التوفيق خلال امتحانات الثانوية العامة التوجيهي. أجدد ترحيبي لزميلاتي المتحدثات استر سليمون ويا-لينغ تشاو، وأهلا وسهلا في الأردن حتى لو بشكل افتراضي. خلال العرض التقديمي اليوم سأقوم باستعراض المحور الأخير من محاور الاستراتيجية، محور الموارد البشرية وبناء القدرات. هذا المحور كما سترون من خلال العروض التقديمية التالية ضروري في تحديد أدوار كافة الأشخاص المعنيين في عملية التعلم والتعليم للطلاب من ذوي الإعاقة، حيث من خلال بناء القدرات والتطوير المهني المستمر لكافة المعنيين سيتم التأكد من تقديم تعليم ذو نوعية جيدة لكافة الطلاب، وبالتالي تقديم الدعم الكافي بما يتعلق بالتعلم لأهالي الطلاب ذوي الإعاقة. أطلع قدما العروض التقديمية لزميلاتي المشاركات استر سليمون ويا-لينغ تشاو. الموارد البشرية وبناء القدرات. تحديد القدرة على تنفيذ التعليم الدامج الفعال في الأردن يعتمد إلى حد كبير على الالتزام والتدريب والمواقف السلوكية الإيجابية تجاه الدمج، ومدى استعداد الكوادر العاملة في مجال التعليم لتبني أهداف التعليم الدامج والسعي إلى تحقيقها. حيث يتعذر تحقيق التعليم الدامج ما لم يكن المعلمون من العوامل الفاعلة في تحقيق التغيير. بناء على ما جاء في ملخص التقرير العالمي لرصد التعليم لعام 2020، أفاد حوالي 25% من المعلمين في الاستقصاء الدولي للتعليم والتعلم لعام 2018 بوجود حاجة ماسة للتطوير المهني في مجال تعليم الطلبة من ذوي الإعاقة. ولكي يكون تعليم المعلمين ذا نوعية جيدة يجب أن يغطي جوانب متعددة من التدريس الدامج لكافة المتعلمين، بدءا بالأساليب التعليمية وإدارة الصفوف المدرسية، وحتى الأفرقة ذات التخصصات المهنية المتعددة وطرق تقييم التعلم، وأن يشمل دعم أعمال المتابعة، مساعدة المعلمين على دمج مهارات جديدة في الممارسات المطبقة في الصفوف المدرسية. تكمن أهمية هذا المحور برفع كفاءة مديري المدارس والمعلمين والأخصائيين المساندين والإداريين في متطلبات التعليم الدامج. تأهيل مديري المدارس لتوفير بيئة مدرسية دامجة، والمعلمين لتعليم كافة الطلبة داخل الغرف الصفية والاستجابة للفروق الفردية للطلبة من ذوي الإعاقة، وتقديم تعليم نوعي لكافة هؤلاء الطلبة. إبراز أهمية توفير المعلم المساند داخل الغرفة الصفية، ووجود أخصائيين لتقديم الخدمات المساندة للطلبة من ذوي الإعاقة من علاج وظيفي، علاج طبيعي، تدريب نطقي، إرشاد نفسي، بوصف ذلك متطلب أساسي لتعليمهم. الجانب الآخر رفع كفاءة المشرفين في مديريات التربية والتعليم في الميدان لدورهم في دعم التعليم الدامج في المدارس. تطوير مهارات التخطيط للعاملين في وزارة التربية والتعليم نظرا لأهمية القرارات الإدارية في بناء نظام مدرسي دامج. ويهدف هذا المحور إلى تحقيق إعداد مديري المدارس في مدارس وزارة وتأهيلهم وتدريبهم. توفير الكوادر المساندة من الأخصائيين لتنفيذ التعليم الدامج. إدراج مساقات حول التعليم الدامج في برامج إعداد المعلمين قبل الخدمة وأثناء الخدمة. التنسيق مع مؤسسات التعليم العالي لتضمين الخطط الدراسية ذات العلاقة بمتطلبات التعليم الدامج. الاستفادة من الخبراء الموجودين في المدارس الدامجة النموذجية، وذلك بهدف مشاركة الممارسات الجيدة ونشرها. وتكمن أهمية هذا المحور في قدرته على التغيير من داخل المنظومة من خلال التدريبات على بناء قدرات كافة ممارسي التعليم لضمان نوعية التعليم الدامج لكافة المتعلمين. هناك فروق واضحة بين التعليم الدامج والمنهجيات والممارسات الأخرى فيما يتعلق بالطلبة ذوي الإعاقة، كما ترون من خلال الرسم التوضيحي. رؤية وزارة التربية والتعليم موجهة نحو التعليم الدامج الشامل. وهنا أود أن أنوه لغويا بالترجمة الفعلية لكلمة Inclusion Education هي التعليم الشامل، ولكن ارتأت وزارة التربية والتعليم مع المجلس الأعلى لحقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والجهات المعنية بحقوق الأشخاص بترجمة كلمة Inclusion بكلمة الدامج وليس الشامل، مع التأكيد على أنها تحمل نفس المعنى للمفهوم باللغة الإنجليزية كما هو موضح بالرسم، حيث أن كلمة Integration تعني الدمج، ولكن بفصل العملية التعليمية، حيث يتم دمج الطلاب ذوي الإعاقة داخل بناء المدرسة ولكن ليس داخل الصفوف الدراسية. Inclusion Education التعليم الدامج هو ما ترتقي إليه وزارة التربية والتعليم تدريجيا، الارتقاء من منهجية Integration الدمج مع فصل الخدمات التعليمية المقدمة للطلاب ذوي الإعاقة إلى جعل كافة مدارسها مدارس دامجة إلى درجة ما وبدون الفصل بما يتعلق بالعملية التعليمية. وبالتالي تضمن حق التعليم للجميع، الأمر الذي يتطلب تكاتف كافة الجهود على كافة المستويات لإنجاح هذه المنهجية. مجددا أتطلع قدما العروض التقديمية التالية إن شاء الله. إني لم أطل الكلام، أتمنى للجميع مؤتمر مثمر. إلى اللقاء في المؤتمر الأخير الأسبوع القادم.
So, thank you, Dr. Musa, for the presentation and for giving us again the importance of our 10-year strategy and the relevance to that one. And I like to hand over now to our first speaker for our first presentation of the topic today, and it's Esther Salamon, the Director of Parents International. And you are trained and practiced as a teacher, and you became later an economist, and you obtained a PhD in educational leadership, and is about to obtain a PhD, which I really like. I mean, that's really always a hard work, isn't it? Like to do it next to your job. You started dealing with the rights of child issues in 1989, and you have specialized in student rights and parents' rights with focus on education in the past 22 years. Esther, you have also been involved in international education and social topics and projects, and primarily focusing on parents' role engagement and competences for over a decade now. And I remember when we had our talk a few weeks ago, it really triggered also some questions on my side and rethinking about, yes, what is our role as parents, and what is maybe not our role, and what are not our responsibilities. And this is today what you will discuss, like the roles of parents and educators and how children can benefit from homeschool partnership when rules are properly defined. And you will draw a comparison between emergency schooling at home versus homeschooling, different things. And you will build up a few recommendations forward on how teachers should support parents in their children's education. And I'm looking forward to listen to your presentation. So the floor is yours, Esther.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for the kind introduction. Yeah, well, it is always a bit of juggling when you are a parent and a professional, but Corona times made it possible for me to submit my PhD, so I only have to defend it, which is a big change. Today's topic involved, I was asked the question whether parents are the new teachers, and I think I have a very easy job because I can simply say no. And I can just conclude my presentation here. But I don't think I will do that. I will answer all the questions that you have asked me. But definitely to answer the question that was posed as the title of this webinar today, I have to say no, parents are not the new teachers, but parents definitely have a certain role in educating their children. I hope my slides are visible. Just not if it's okay. Is it okay? Yeah, okay. The answer to the unasked question is that we really have to empower both the parents and the teachers in the school. And I also have to mention the other professionals working in the school, because very often the non-teaching staff has a very important role to play, especially when it comes to special education needs children. First of all, if I can put my slide forward, yeah. I want to give a very broad definition of the role of parents in education. First of all, the parent is the primary educator of the child. It means two things. One is that the parent is the first educator, so you start educating your child at birth or even before. But also, all research shows that parents have the biggest impact on learning outcomes, even if they cannot actually support schoolwork. The mindset of children is primarily defined by the mindset of parents, and this primary role on the learning outcomes is remaining with the child until age about 11-12, when it's taken over by the peer group. And unfortunately, it's bad news for teachers. It's never the teachers who have the biggest impact on learning outcomes and the approach to learning. At the same time, the parents, as the biggest impact people on the life of the child, are scaffolders of learning. So they can create the environment for good learning, but it doesn't mean that they have to build a house. The scaffolding idea is represented in the middle picture. And also parents can be gatekeepers in education. When you try to introduce something new, then you can always think about the parents as gatekeepers. But a gatekeeper, I know it's not proper English, but we've been discussing it with UK colleagues and they said it's okay. A gatekeeper can be what you can see on the left-hand side, preventing change. So somebody who will prevent you from going through the gate, but at the same time, and this is what we're aiming for, this is what you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we're aiming for parents who are supporting us in keeping the door open for inclusive quality education for all. For this, what you need to build is a proper partnership between the home and the school. According to law, regardless of what national legislation says, the parents are primarily responsible for the education of the children. If it is put in other ways in the national legislation, it can be challenged, because this is exactly what the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says, and international treaties have a higher level of authority than national laws. According to the UNCRC, the school is a vehicle to support the parents in educating their children, and it has to be done in ways the parents need it. And for this reason, we also have to establish a very clear division of what the school is going to educate the children in and what the role of the house, the home, in education is. A very important point, and I was very happy to hear Dr. Musa saying that you are primarily building your program on teacher training, is that you have to understand that if you really want to have equitable education, so if you really want to offer the same possibilities to thrive for every child, you must not rely on the family with schoolwork. Homework is the best example. If you have a mixed classroom and you have children who come from less educated families, the worst thing you can do is giving them homework. You have to deal with the schoolwork in the classroom, in the home, during the lessons. But there are methodologies, for example, flipped classroom methodologies are very good for that. I don't want to go into detail because then it would be a 90-minute presentation. But I think it's a very important thing to highlight. What is the basis of this partnership? A very simple division. The parent knows his or her child best, and the teachers know how to teach certain things. And you have to have that starting point to establish any kind of partnership. This partnership can only be equal. And I would like to just switch on a potential kind of guidelines for establishing this partnership. What is very important to understand is to define the role of the school staff and the parents in the supporting of the education of the child. You are not teaching. I, as a professional educator, believe that there is no teaching, just learning. So when we talk about engaging the parents, you have to think about what role the school staff and the parents play around supporting the learning of the child. What you see on the screen is a very simple kind of set of starting points. It was established by Janet Goodall a few years ago. It is based on the banking model of education of Paulo Freire, but it has been rethought because according to the Freire framework, school is the place of knowledge, and this is something that needs to change in the current world, because school is not the place of knowledge anymore, but it definitely is a place of knowledge about educational methodologies. And for this reason, these basic rules were set up. I like it very much, and this is why I wanted to share this with you. And the thing listed in this slide have become very clear in the past 3-4 months that we have lived through. And as Stephanie has mentioned, I really wanted to make the point that what we had in the past few months, which was an emergency schooling at home, is not equal to homeschooling. What we have found is that most of the parents do not want to homeschool. Homeschooling is a very conscious, very important decisions that some people make. But at the same time, we can learn from those parents who have made this conscious decision. We also have to understand that the efficiency of this emergency schooling at home very much depended on the approach of the school to the learning at home. And I wanted to highlight that on the long run, it's not going to be a thing to keep up with having more and more family learning programs. If you look at the real outcomes of different family learning programs around the world, what you can say that more or less the only one that has a long-term and really proven impact is any program that incentivizes the family to read together anything, not prescribed reading, not textbooks, anything. And that has an overwhelmingly huge impact on the learning outcomes of children. What was very well, we have some learning points that we can take for regular school times, and also there are things we have learned from the past few months that we can think about if we have another emergency period. But one thing is very clear, that children have learned more in those countries where there was no curricular pressure, but where they supported home learning in a different way. So instead of giving the children sheets to solve on measurements, they were simply telling the parents to bake a cake and try to measure the ingredients. And if they have enough, they can probably experiment with, instead of 1 gram of salt, putting in 1 decagram or 1 kilo, which is a much, much better way of learning. So it has to be done very differently at home and at school. And I think it's very important to consider this, because I just want to flash 2 numbers to you that has to be taken with us when we think about long-term solutions. The blue numbers are from a World Bank publication showing the percentage of children who are at school. They are not early school leavers, but do not master basic reading and mathematics. I did not find the data for Jordan, I'm sorry, but you can see that the numbers are really not good. I don't want to mention any other countries. I want to mention my own. I'm Hungarian. I'm just stuck here for Corona in Amsterdam. And in Europe, in the European Union, in Central and Eastern Europe, 22% of children going to school and finishing school do not master reading. And what is even more frightening, 37% of them do not master very basic maths. So there is a lot to change. And I don't think that the numbers for Jordan are much, much better than this. On the other chart, you will see our own research. And this is something that needs to be changed after these months of Corona emergency schooling at home. It's research done in 25 European countries. And you can see that while only 12 countries, while only 3 countries give a decisive role to parents on the content of curriculum, and if you add the decisive role and consultative, half of them even consult them on curriculum, there is no country in Europe that offers any decision-making role to parents in the teaching methodology. And I think that teaching methodology has proven to be the biggest problem or a biggest challenge in the last few months. Parents International made a global research, and we have come up with a global initiative called New Education Deal Parents First. And these are the learning points that we highlighted for school education for the coming period, for normal times. So not for continuing with Corona, not for another emergency, but for normal times. What has been very apparent that the biggest thing missing in most countries was incentivizing social learning. Children in the Netherlands were really lucky because schoolyards were open and they were full of children 24/7, even during the short 2 months school closures. But social learning was a missing element. We have to find a clear division of tasks between the home and the school. We have to agree on what we mean by basics so that never again children will be overwhelmed by loads of schoolwork for no real apparent reason, because it's not really basic learning. We have to refocus, and I think it's especially important in the case of special education needs and disabled children, to focus on well-being and to have a very large focus on arts, sports, playful methodologies, and probably rethink school schedules. Some countries are already doing it. It's also apparent that we have to reimagine assessment, because a lot of countries were ready to now abolish standardized tests and it did not hurt, so why not really rethink it? And we really want to keep using digital tools in a certain form, but not to replace socializing and face-to-face teaching. Whatever we are going to talk about, our most important finding is that teachers need to understand and acknowledge family circumstances. And this is something to bring forward, because if you are not considering the family, your work in the classroom will not be successful. And for this, although my task was to talk about the support needs of parents, I also want to talk about the support needs of teachers. Parents very often first need to understand that they are actually helping their children learn, especially for parents who have low levels of education. It's a huge moment when they understand that, well, if a 2-year-old can walk and talk, you are a great educator. And this is a starting point that can change their approach to also school education. They also have to understand what is the role of the school, because sometimes parents tend to put more weight or pose more expectations on the school. They have to understand that the school is educating hundreds of children, so they are not going to replace them in their role of educating. Also, you need to help them if they don't have the right tools to support better learning at home. It doesn't mean that you help them to do homework, but it means that you make them understand why it's important to play together, to sit down for a joint meal and discuss everyday topics, very simple things. And we also have some experience with working with parents of children with intellectual disabilities, where it's very important, but I think it's important for all parents to first tend to their own needs. You know that in an airplane, when they demonstrate the safety instructions, the safety equipment, they show you how to use the oxygen mask, and they tell you that use your mask first and then help anybody else. If the parent is not okay, then you cannot really help your children. It's also very important to help them to have assertive communication with the school, but not aggressive. And for this reason, and this is a very challenging thing, parents of disabled children need to understand that other people have other challenges. Because in an inclusive classroom, you will have multiple challenges. And if one parent or one group of parents push their own agenda, inclusion and equity will not happen. And also, I think it's important to support the parents in understanding the specialities of raising a child with special needs. And this is something that, unfortunately, is a task for the teachers and sometimes the non-teaching staff at school. At the same time, I don't want to go into detail because I know that I'm quite late and I've overrun my 15 minutes. That parents need to, teachers need to understand and learn how to work with people who are different from them. It's usually the biggest chunk, and that's what we find in teacher training, the biggest effort for teachers to understand and collaborate with other people. You have to know that according to research, the overwhelming majority of teachers are very cautious people who feel best in their own middle class, lower middle class environment. But in a school, they have to work together with people from much lower and much higher socioeconomic background than their own. And both of them can be really, really challenging for the everyday teacher. There is a joke saying that the teacher is a person who started school at the age of 6 and never left. It sounds like a joke, but this is true. They know a certain environment, they feel comfortable there, but for an equitable educational provision for everybody, they have to come out of their comfort zone. And this is where we need to focus the training and also the coaching and mentoring efforts. If we really want to have equitable schools, and if we really want to have proper parental engagement for this. Everything else that I listed on this slide comes as a result of this basic need. And I just want to finish with a very basic 4 pillars for building the homeschool partnership. If the teachers cannot be made believe in this, it will fail. All families have dreams for their children and want the best for them. I have a friend who has been a school leader for decades, and he says that he's yet to meet a single parent who doesn't want the best for their children. They may not have the tools, but they do want the best for them. The second pillar is that all families have the capacity for supporting their children's learning. Of course, some need more help in rolling out this capacity. The third pillar is that parents and school staff are equal partners. And probably the biggest challenge for the teaching community to understand that the responsibility for building and sustaining this partnership, I've just realized how many spelling mistakes I have. So the responsibility for building and sustaining this partnership is primarily with the school staff and especially with the school leader. And this is the reason why we need to focus on the professionals when we want to have proper parental engagement for equitable, inclusive education. And I just want to thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to questions, and you can also reach me. My details are on the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther. Yes, maybe you can switch off your microphone. It's sometimes creating an echo if too many of us have the microphone on. So thank you very much for this interesting presentation, and I think it will give some food for thoughts for many of us. And I will hand over to David Batista and Sabine Altali, because I see there was some action happening in the chat already, before we go to our second presenter, Yang-Ling.
Yes, Stephanie, thanks a lot. Actually, we had one comment from the Center of Hope, which focused, basically, they shared their experience. Sorry, they shared their experiences where they gave lessons via Skype with groups of 3 students and 1 teacher. And this was, it became very evident from the feedback they received after these lessons, that on one hand, the parents really appreciated the work of the teachers, and at the same time, they also understood that their role in the education of their children, in a way, has to be more given to the teacher, but they have to be there sometimes when they need this extra support. So, for example, one of the parents' comments was that she said, "I don't know my son anymore. With me, he wouldn't sit for 6 minutes and concentrate, but with the teacher and his classmates, he would sit for 60 minutes. And he would actually get annoyed if there is background noise around him." So I think this is also, as Esther just mentioned now, the appreciation from on one hand, the parent side, to also back the teachers in supporting their children's education. We do have a question, one question coming from Alia Zoraikat, our colleague from the Higher Council. Alia referred to Dr. Dr. Esther's comment with regards to the delineation of roles and responsibilities between parents and school staff. However, she asked that when parents, in the case, have children with multiple disabilities, the roles of parents and school staff or teachers are not clearly defined. And at times, the home becomes an extension of the schoolwork. And this is, she mentions that this is where the challenges lies. And she would like to hear if there are any practices in the Netherlands or elsewhere that can serve as a pilot practice or model practices for us, for here, for example, to learn from, in Jordan to learn from. Perhaps we could either allow Esther to answer the question now, or we could jump in after Ya-Lingh's presentation to answer this question.
Esther, you would like to maybe now answer already the question because it was related also to your talk, and if you have like good practices, you could refer to.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you very much. Well, as a matter of fact, for every child, very often the home looks like an extension of the school, and this is what needs to be changed. What is a very special thing with multiple disabilities is that very often the parents have a role in the classroom rather than bringing homework home. What I can refer to as probably one of the best examples is an outcome of a big research project called Include Ed, where one of the main policy initiatives that they had was introducing parents as kind of assistant teachers in the classroom. And the interesting thing is that according to the outcomes of the research they have done since 2005, so it's already 15 years, that the learning outcomes of the children are more or less the same if it's their own parents who support them in the classroom or if it's another parent. So they did it with having 2-3 mothers in the classroom, trying to establish groups where one child was the given mother's child, or doing it totally mixed up so that nobody was supporting the classroom work of their own children. And basically the outcomes are the same. So with a little bit of training, you can help the parents support classroom work without any bias towards their own children. How to support a different kind of learning at home. We can also help you with that. We've been training the parents of children with intellectual disabilities, but also it's very clear that for an overwhelming majority of intellectually disabled children, you see multiple disabilities. I'm also involved in a very interesting project that you can probably utilize called Multinclude, where we are trying to support schools to have inclusive education provisions in the classroom, considering that each and every child has multiple inclusion needs, even if they are not disabled. And it means that they can introduce practices that is close to an individualized learning plan. But very honestly, the starting point is that the teachers have to get rid of the need to control, because if they want to control all the processes in the classroom, it's not going to happen. If they believe that learning happens without them controlling every second, it will work.
Thank you, Esther, for this answer, and thank you also for the one comment. And it's great to see the work of Center of Hopes. I hope we can be in contact after this webinar series. So please use the chat during the time our next presenter is like having her speech. That's Ya-Líng, and I really welcome you today. You're from Taiwan, and I learned before we started that it's like evening. It must be almost 8 o'clock now. So thanks for joining after work hours today, our webinar. Ya-Líng is a qualified special education teacher. She is a theater teaching artist, a teacher trainer, and inclusive education consultant with extensive multicultural and interdisciplinary experience of working in education, public policy, administration, and in the NGO sector in Taiwan, US, Cambodia, Lebanon, UK, and Myanmar. You supported the Taiwan Ministry of Education for 3 years in designing and implementing national inclusive education policies and initiatives. And you currently work as a continuous professional development and inclusion advisor at the VSO, the Voluntarily Service Overseas in Myanmar, and as an autism spectrum disorder and intervention and family support specialist at Graduate Institute of Early Intervention of the National Taichung University of Education in Taiwan. It's great to see you back because yes, we had the chance to talk before, and I think like I was really interested also in your previous experience, like the things you did also in Taiwan. So I'm really excited to learn more also today. And you will discuss the impact of COVID-19 on teachers, and the presentation will highlight lessons learned from inclusive education, which can apply to teachers in the current situation of interrupted education, but I think it also can be applied after like COVID-19. And you do that in consideration of family-student-teacher partnership and teachers, how they find themselves in different roles. And also there to see probably the interlinkages to the parents. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
I think there's something wrong. All right. Excuse me, Stephanie. I think I encountered the difficulty of sharing my presentation.
If it doesn't work, I'm sure David has it, so maybe he can share it. And then you can just like maybe start also with the introduction. And just David, give me a sign in the chat that you can share it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right. So good afternoon and good evening from Taiwan. So my name is Ya-Líng. So firstly, thank GZ for this opportunity that I can participate from this webinar from this very far away. My presentation will be draw on upon my experience as a teacher and teacher educator, and to focus on more on how teacher and school and education authority can work with the parents during this difficult time. So as this COVID-19 outbreak has unexpectedly interrupted many of our plans this year, it also posed a lot of challenge for us, like especially working in the education sector. So fortunately in Taiwan, we haven't really encountered like the school closure challenge. But when I was forced to return from Myanmar because of there's a school closure. So when we see like, well, many efforts has been invested to ensure children's continual learning despite the school closure, I would like to talk how this education crisis can perhaps provide education sector to rethink the role of the parents and teacher, and also in children's education, and also how they can work together. So due to the time limit, my presentation will briefly cover 3 parts. So the first part is how we already know about parents' involvement in children's education. And second, we were going to talk about what kind of change this COVID-19 crisis has brought to us as teachers, and how this change can also be an opportunity to rethink each role as a teacher and a parent, and which might need to lead into a new direction of cooperation, and which might be in a preparation for the next crisis coming. Next, David, please. So what we have already know about parent and education is no matter which background parents are from, most of them do care about their children, but the way and the degrees of involvement are varied. So school needs to take initiative to engage them, because as we know from a lot of studies and projects that involving families can indeed have a positive impact on children's learning. But how to do it needs to be customized to each family. Next, thank you. So this importance of family involvement has been recognized in a lot of education policy as well. As you can see from what I quote, from some text from the Inclusive Education Plan and Inclusive Strategic Plan in Jordan. So we can see from that, like, dominant start to highlight the importance of family involvement. And it also states that schools and education authority need to reach out to engage or mobilize the family. Next, please. So how does it relate to today's presentation? This COVID-19 crisis has forced many schools to shut down. So whether we like it or not, how long this school closure situation will last still remains a question. Next, David, thank you. So, but however, in this case, one thing is certain, teaching now is not happening in actual classrooms and the schools. So for teachers, they face many changes. Now they work in different teaching contexts and teaching remotely. Moreover, teachers now not only teaching the student, but sometimes they need to extend it to teach the students' parents how to support or even to teach their children at home, so that we can ensure children's learning continues even during offline hours. So which means that unlike teaching in the classroom we are familiar with before, where teachers we have a full controls. Now teachers need to share this authority with the parents. Next, please. So that is to say, like, while there's still uncertainty ahead, whether schools are open or not, now teacher and school might need to consider taking parents on board in education, but not just as the supporters in education, as we expect them to be before. Rather, now school might need to think about how to include parents as partners in education. And this might present us an opportunity to rethink the way schools cooperate with the parents. Next, please. So in this case, the cooperation model from inclusive and special education might be able to shed some light. Like, first, in inclusive and special education, the focus of teaching and learning is not only on children's academic development, but also we focus on social, emotional, physical, and cognitive development of the children. In other words, like in inclusive education, teachers tend to look at a child as a whole human, which means that learning and teaching can happen everywhere, anytime, even outside the school and the school's hours. And so usually in inclusive and special education policy and practice, we adopt, I'm sorry, there's a misspelling here because the autocorrect, the transdisciplinary cooperation, which is developed based on the ecological system theory. As you can see, they're in their microsystem. We see there's a family and classroom and religious setting and a peer group. So in which the parents are actively involved as the teaching partners for children's learning at home. Next, please. So you can see from the example that the cooperation now has extended from the current approach of involving and engaging families into partnering with the family with an recognition that the contribution of the parents and the home learning to children's education is equally important as school teacher and the school learning. Next, please. So how does this partnership look like? Here, I usually use a clinic sim as a metaphor. The reason why I choose a medical curve figure rather than teachers is because in many countries, teaching is not highly regarded profession. I use it because I want to emphasize that, like a doctor needs to be receive the professional training to be able to take care of children's health. Teachers need to be also professional as a medical doctor in order to take care of children's learning. So, and you will see there's one thing is I also include students here because fundamentally learning should be a student's responsibility. So in Taiwan, in our policy, we start to include students in their own learning decision making from elementary school level onward. So you can see from the picture here, there's a lot of information sharing going on. There's a strategy, solution, history, situation, and issues. So the profession role, the role of as a profession, he should provide the strategy need of the family needs in order to support their kids. So and also you might see there's a part arrow on the right side. Is that also as a professional, we need the support from external bodies, which might mean the schools, also in education authorities. So, and most of all, you might notice that they are all in equal positions. So, which means that everyone's inputs and outputs in this partnership are equally valued. So one thing to be noted is that I put the relationship on the bottom because the foundation of the partnership needs to be built on from a positive relationship, and which means that the school needs to and teachers need to reach out to build up this positive relationship with the family so that families can feel comfortable and confident to engage with the professional. Next, please. So from the example we see on the previous slide, you can see this partnership requires a system-wide effort, which means that teacher or parents cannot do it alone. So, and there requires a lot of open communication and information sharing. And this partnership, the goal of this partnership is building on how to improve the student learning. So everyone in this partnership is an active partner with a shared goal and a shared responsibility. Next, please. Which is to say, the school needs to reach out because we need to build a positive family-school relationship so that we can set a stage for the partnership and to provide the opportunity for the family, that they can gradually learn how to partner with schools, like in cooperative planning, problem solving, and decision making of their children's learning. Thank you. Next. So what's the teacher's role in this partnership? Teacher, we have to recognize that one thing is that we are just one of the team members. Even we were the one to take initiative. So which means that we need to recognize families are our partners. So who can also provide learning opportunity, but not only supporting. So which means that we need to seek and acknowledge and celebrate the family's input so that we can build up the trust, the mutual understanding, which is very vital for this cooperation. Next, please. Also, as Esther just mentioned, that parents don't know how to, what's their role and what they can do to support or provide a learning opportunity. So that's where the teacher's profession come in, because we need to act as a guide. But firstly, we need to assess family strength and challenge. And what's their strength and challenge on the parents-children interaction and learning at home. Also, we need to provide the strategy on routine building, because this is most important for the student with a disability. It is very important to build a learning routine. And also the common issues of the parents they encounter at home, you often it's not about the learning, but about they don't know how to deal and manage their children's misbehavior. So this is very important when you address that. And also, as Esther just mentioned, learning at home should be very different from learning in school. So it's more about interaction and how you're gonna guide the parents through this. You need to do not only discussion, but also to do some demonstration. Another important role of a teacher is that to act as a bridge, which means that teacher need to act as a bridge between schools and the parents. So this is very important to provide a two-way, but in multiple channels, because we know some parents might not have access to internet or whatever, so that we can ensure the families stay informed about their children's learning progress. Also, school can know the family situation and priority. Next, please. So, as what we say, it is very important. A teacher cannot do it alone. So, what's the roles of education authority in this partnership? Firstly, we need to provide the guidance and support, especially in terms of COVID-19. So firstly, we need to provide the guidance and support on how to enter in the curriculum and instruction, and building a positive relationship with family and students, which is responsive to the diverse learning need and situation of children and family. Also, this is very important to grant the teacher autonomy that permits a flexibility to develop the learning goal and activity, which aim encourage parents and students to work with what they know and what they have available at home, especially in terms of COVID-19. Next, please. Also, education authority should consider to establish a one-stop website. As I know from the document, Jordan has been done very good. They have a DOSAC. So it's very important to one-stop site that you can provide home learning resource and the support, and also the education updates of COVID-19 to not only teachers and families. And also sometimes in some countries will provide helplines, so that which is for the parents of family who don't have internet access at home. And it is so important, because now there's no face-to-face, it's hard to have a face-to-face interaction. So it's also very important to provide a financial subsidies, like data package to the teachers. And sometimes if you want, you can, if it's allowed with you, you can provide the data package to the parents so that they can stay engaged with the student, and also they can connect with each other for support. And also it's very important that a teacher can take this opportunity to continue their professional development learning through online platform. Next, please. So what is in the long run, like after the COVID-19 crisis, we need to focus on how to develop the capacity of the teacher and the schools. For the teachers, you need to guide them how to build up the positive relationship is vital for the partnership. And how can we engage effectively with the family and with different cultural, different linguistic backgrounds, different socio-economic background. Also for the school leader, it is very crucial to have a training in how to plan, organize, implement, and evaluate the partnership in their own schools. And the support network is necessary in this partnership as well. And we usually know that in education, we have our own support network. And sometimes in family side, we have our own support network because sometimes it belongs to different ministry. But it's very important to integrate these two networks so that we can provide resource and professional support that teacher and school can counsel, and also they can refer their family to. And as for the policy and the procedure, it is very important to review the current policy and the procedure so that you can develop a practical guidance to the school and on how to implement this partnership. Next, please. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions and comments are welcomed. Here I also, next please, Debbie. Here I also include an example from Indonesia, but due to the time limits, I wouldn't dig deeper for that, to that. So in Indonesia, they also face the situation like Jordan. They have a school closure, and they face, there's a lot of family have a difficulty to access to the distance learning platform. So they provide the guidance like how the learning at home can be carried on. So so they stress that distance learning is actually implemented to provide the learning experience. So and the home learning should focus on the life skill education. And they also give grant the teacher autonomy and the flexibility to adopt the curriculum, also the grading. So teachers now can give qualitative grading instead of quantitative grades. So next, please. And here I also given I find an example from African context. It's like some suggested home learning activity for students with a disability. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ya-Ling, for this interesting presentation. I think like a lot of things fitted very well to also what Esther was telling, and added some other content, which probably I see there was a bit of a lively discussion also happening in the chat. So I will hand over now to David and Serene to let us know what happened during the last presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna jump first, David. So we have a lot of comments was shared like in the chat section. The first comment was like about the key messages that can be sent to all parents who are in their homes due to the outbreak of this virus, that no one accepts you to be a replacement for school or for teachers. The child learns from the home environment a lot of skills, knowledge and values that cannot be separated from learning in the formal class environment. Everything a child learns in one day is a positive. Maintaining mental and physical health for ourselves and our children should be our priority as a parent in such critical times. And the participant gave an example. If educational activities based on particular approach are effective for a parent, so be it. And if activities based on a daily task at home are effective for others, that is also a good thing to implement also. That second comment from thank you, Ayman Quaider from Annie organization for writing this comment. So Ayman was like one of the speaker in the second webinar, if I'm remembering correctly. Ayman wrote basically in times of crisis, children's educational learning condition differ. Even if the school provides training materials to help kids achieve, there must be a sort of support to manage expectations and enhancing confidence. I think the vital message for all parents is that they are not substitutes for teachers and nobody is expected to be teachers. And he sent his greetings to everyone. Another participant, thank you, from a local CBO, the threshold of knowledge for training. Through our implementation for a workshop related to dialogue between the spirit and body, the results were wonderful with the teachers and the people who worked with the parents. And the reaction were if we could present our experience, like that the participant who participated in this workshop, that they would love to share their experience. The last comments from one of the participants, unfortunately, like the participant, they don't write their names. The comments was like, it's mandatory in times of global crisis, such as the corona crisis, to always remind us of the importance of looking after the physical and mental health of children and their parents, where children need love, enhanced reassurance, and security above all. One of the participants, this is like the only question I have, and then I will hand over to David. Many countries have one, and I think Esther replied to that question in the chat section, but I will mention it. Like the participant talked about the role of parents that Esther mentioned, and the teacher and the school. What is the role of the system and laws, especially that the teacher is the weakest link in the educational process in light of the regulations and laws in effect? Also like the infrastructure and the learning and safe environment. So I think, I'm not sure if Esther, you applied to this question, but like it's about what's the role of systems and laws in order to support the parents and the teacher during this time of crisis. And that's it. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer to this question live about the role of system and laws? Okay, Stephanie is nodding. So, well, I think it's a very valid question because a lot of the things that are happening are up to the school, but a positive legislative environment is very important. I can speak from my personal experience because in Hungary between 1995 and 98, we had all the legislative framework necessary for full parental engagement, but it was not enough because we did not accompany it with any other supportive measures. So I think that, first of all, you have to put it in legislation, that parents need to be engaged in all decision making in and around the school. You should also have legislative frameworks that provide the possibility for all parents with a proper representation to have a say on any educational decision up to national level. But at the same time, you mustn't leave the school alone or a municipality alone. But also the system and legislation needs to provide the necessary not only training, but also coaching and mentoring processes for teachers and school leaders. I believe that not the teacher that is the weakest link or the most important possible weak link. I believe in the role of school leaders, because what we have experienced with it, once you have the school leader on board, once they understand why it is important to engage with all the parents and they are ready to support their staff, then an overwhelming majority of their staff will follow. So I would concentrate these coaching and mentoring efforts primarily on the school leaders. And of course, you also have to give them tools as a system to support their individual teachers. So to my understanding, it's a double-sided task. One, to create the legislative environment for making parental engagement compulsory on the school side. But at the same time, you also have to make the parents understand that this is not a choice. They are responsible for the education of their children. So they must be engaged. It's not a choice whether you want to be engaged with the school or not. And the other thing is to support these individual participants.
Thank you, Esther. Then I will hand over to David.
Yes, another question, which was posted in English. The question goes like this: during this serious crisis, there is no way to think about the achievement level that a child should or may not reach. How is it possible now, and in this difficult reality, to evaluate a child by looking at an assumed basic criterion at a time when every child receives a unique education that is completely different from the child next to him or her, and in such exceptional circumstances? It's a question at the same time more of a, I would say, a call to answer the current situation. Maybe Ya-Ling, you would like to answer?
Yes, I think this, as I mentioned, that this situation actually provide a very good opportunity for us about the learning at home and school. Even they are equally important, but they are happening in different forms. So in Taiwan, like in National Taichung University of Education, we actually educate, our focus is like educate the parents to teach their kids at home. So, which means that we translate what's written in the curriculum and to make it more home-based, appropriate, like learning opportunity. So we kind of translate and connect it, and in the way the parents can understand, and so they can also apply in their home setting. So that's the one we have been doing for years. And so far as my experience show that parents have very positive feedback, because, you know, as I say, like in inclusive and special education, we tend to look at children as a whole human being, which means that we consider what kind of learning at home and school, they are a co-context. They influence like each other, which means that what we want intended to teach in the school, we can translate to something can be extended to teach in the school, at home, sorry. But parents need to know how to do it. And that's what Esther has been mentioned earlier, that parents is not the one to play the teacher's role. Remember, we are the professional. So we need to be the one to be the guide, to guide parents to do it through the demonstration, through the role modeling, and even the discussion. So I think this crisis actually remind us of that. And also for the older kids, it's very important for them to develop their agency. It's very good time for them to take the responsibility of their own learning, so that they can expand what they have learned in the school work, and also to apply in their home setting. So that's, yeah.
Thank you, Ya-Ling. Just like David, Savine, is there anything else?
Esther would like also to answer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if possible, because I have a different approach to this question. And I want to come back what I said in my presentation, that one of the outcomes of our own research was that parents would be very happy, and also many teachers would be very happy to rethink all these standardized testing regimes. Because that's the other side of the question, because the question was how you can assess the learning of children being educated in different ways and environments. Well, first of all, if you educate children in the same environment, according to the same methodology, the outcomes will be very different. So the different circumstances are not that big a problem, but I think that this situation gave us a very good opportunity to rethink whether we need so many tests, whether we really need to assess children in exams in certain points of their lives, or whether it's much better to have formative assessment throughout their schooling period. Because, well, at the end of the day, to compare the outcomes of a very long learning process to the outcomes of a single event, and probably make life decisions to the child based on a one moment snapshot, is not the best. So I think this is a great opportunity to rethink. You know that in many countries they are trying to introduce different gamified methodologies to evaluation, which doesn't mean playing, but it means an evaluation process that is similar to computer games, where you have a number of lives. So you can fail and retry, or you can collaborate with others to achieve a certain task together, or you can bring in an extra task that you have done and add it to your achievement. So I think that this question can also trigger this whole questioning of making decisions for the life of the child on further education, on going on to secondary education, being able to join tertiary education or even university based on a snapshot, or rather to have formative assessment that also helps their learning process later on.
Thank you, Esther, too, also answering that one. Looking on the time, I think we would have still left a few minutes so we could facilitate another question, if there's any. Savine, David?
Yes.
Maybe one more? Yes.
I can summarize two, and then maybe the speakers can choose which one to answer. Are there any resources or standard operating procedures to enable parents in countries with limited resources to do so? And the second question is, what about the role of parents in educational assessments? Before I hand over the floor, I would also like to thank Ms. Abir Murrar from the Ministry of Education, who also commented by saying that the Ministry of Education is taking psychosocial support for children very seriously, and also emphasized that parents are also an integral part in this kind of support because they are the closest to the children, and a provision of sufficient awareness and practical methodologies to them is very important and key in this regard. I would hand over the floor to Ya-Ling or Esther. Thank you.
I can start with the role of parents in assessment. Well, it's a mixed thing because very often the approach of parents to any assessment, especially grading, is very much influenced by their own school experiences. So if you want to change what's happening, you need to make the parents believe in the new system. And as a professional, you have to be assertive and you have to convince them that this is better than the traditional ones. There are very good schemes where the parents can co-assess their children with the teacher, because sometimes the teachers don't realize certain learning points. But this can only happen if the assessment is relative. So when you don't have standards that the children need to meet, but when you are assessing the learning of the child as compared to their previous level and as compared to their abilities. And especially when it comes to children with special needs, the parents often see a different kind of learning outcome, that probably they are inhibited to do something in the classroom and they do it at home, or the other way around also. So I think that it's very important, and also I shouldn't forget about the necessary assessment of the teachers and the schools that needs to be done by the parents and the children alike. And of course, there is a big role for peer assessment, because you can only develop your professional knowledge and professional practices if you have feedback from all the main players, your peers, the parents, and also the students. And the first part of the question, well, the good thing in parental engagement that it's not resource heavy. You only need to learn a few tricks, and if you don't have resources, you can still engage with the parents very nicely, even if there is no internet connection, even if you are not in a WhatsApp group. It's easy, and well, we are always there to support you to think together to establish methodology that is right for the Jordan context.
Thank you, Esther. Then I will hand over to Ya-Ling. You would like to give some comments on the last question?
I agree with Esther said. In Taiwan, we are like very exam-based country. We look at for like the scores, quantitative score that much. So in Taiwan, what Ministry of Education in Taiwan right now, we try to incorporate about the question on how to apply the knowledge in the real life events into the written assessment, which means that children and the parents, they can not only learn those knowledge from the textbook or from the classroom, they need to take the answers. They can only answer when they know what's happening like right now, even like through the different platforms. So that's one thing we do. And also I think as I mentioned on my presentation, like the way of the engagement is important, but most important is like how you set up the stage. So even though it's a very resource poor situation, but the most important is about the teacher's attitude, because relationship is the key. If you really want to engage and you are willing to respect and accept the parents' ideas, you can always find a way. So there is a parents family engagement, like a partnership. We always emphasize the importance of the relationship, and we put attitude as the foundation of the partnership. So we need to have a right attitude so we can have approach and we can do action.
Thank you very much, both of you, for ending quite positively also, that things are possible even if we have low resources or difficult circumstances. And looking at the time, we even 1 minute late, but I think that's perfectly fine. Thanks a lot again to our presenters today, Dr. Musa, but also Esther and Ya-Ling. It was a very interesting discussion again, and I think a lot of food of thought for everybody. I also take my notes down, and I mean, like, both of you have spoke a lot about relationship, team players, building up, you know, certain skills and competencies on both sides. And I think like that's something we can continue to do online and offline, and we have to do it. And especially for building up an inclusive education system. So I like to end this webinar, and my special thanks goes again to Julia Zugaib, who is like the sign interpreter, who was also like helping us today. Thank you, Julia. I want also to thank Abir Mourad. She was mentioning by David before. She's a colleague in the Ministry of Education, and she will be presented also in the next webinar, our final webinar, because she's taking different recommendations for our own work in the Jordan education sector. I also would like to thank Lilia Rosmanek, who is currently an intern at our project and who is helping us facilitating in the chat and summarizing what's going on, and that's really helpful even for me. Lilia, thanks a lot for that, and of course thank you to Sveen Altali and David De Battista for helping me managing the different comments and discussions. I'd like to invite everybody for the our final webinar next week, July 13th, Building Back Better, because we would like to look back, but also look forward and discussing what's going to happen next. And yes, building back better means like we have learned a lot of things in the past months, and how can we make sure when schools, hopefully schools, majority of schools will open again in August, September, how we can facilitate that. Yes, so that's for today. And just a little reminder, and on our feedback, we living out of our feedback, and we already received a lot from the last webinars, but I also like to invite everybody to participate in our feedback form, and you find the link in the question and answer chat, and it only takes like 2 minutes. So goodbye, good night or good day to my speakers in Taiwan and the Netherlands, and see you hopefully next time. Bye.